There are moments in history that only a handful of people witness. Moments so extraordinary, so dangerous, that those who saw them are bound by an unspoken oath of silence. The night of October 17, 1964, in a dimly lit warehouse in Hong Kong's Kowloon district, was one of those moments. Only 8 people stood in that cold concrete space. What they witnessed that night would haunt them for the rest of their lives. I was one of them. My name is Ep Man, and I am about to reveal the most dangerous fight Bruce Lee ever fought. A fight against a professional killer. A fight the world was never meant to know about. The discovery that changed everything. These words were written in my private journal, locked away for decades in a steel box beneath the floorboards of my Hong Kong apartment. Bruce's children, Shannon and Brandon, found these pages years after both Bruce and I had passed into memory. What they discovered was not just a story about their father's fighting prowess. It was a revelation about the night Bruce Lee faced death itself and the professional assassin who nearly succeeded in delivering it. For 50 years, 8 witnesses kept this secret. We swore an oath in blood and honor that October night, promising never to speak of what we saw, but death has claimed 7 of us now. I am the last, and the truth can no longer remain buried. Let me take you back to that autumn evening in 1964, when my student faced the most lethal opponent of his life, a man who killed for money, who had never lost a fight, and who saw Bruce Lee as just another contract to fulfill. The professional killer, his name was Chen Wei Long, though most knew him simply as the Iron Shadow. To call him merely a martial artist would be like calling a shark merely a fish. Chen Wei Long was a professional killer who used ancient fighting techniques as his weapons of assassination. In the underground fighting circuits of Hong Kong, Macau, and Southeast Asia, Chen's reputation was written in blood. 47 sanctioned death matches, 47 victories, 3 opponents killed outright, 7 others permanently crippled. Their fighting careers, and often their ability to walk, ended forever by Chen's methodical brutality. But Chen wasn't some street thug who'd learned to fight dirty. He was a master of traditional Chinese martial arts, trained in a brutal form of Hung Gar combined with techniques he claimed to have learned during 5 years in a Tibetan monastery. Whether the monastery story was true, no one could verify. What everyone could verify was his record of systematic destruction. At 42 years old that autumn, Chen had not softened with age. If anything, the years had sharpened him into something more terrifying. His body bore the scars of countless battles, knife wounds across his ribs, burn marks on his forearms from red-hot temple brands, and fingers permanently bent from breaks that had healed wrong. Each scar was a story of survival, a testament to his ability to endure and inflict pain in equal measure. But it was his eyes that truly marked him as different from other fighters, empty, devoid of mercy, hesitation, or human warmth. When Chen Wei Long looked at you, you understood that he had made peace with death long ago, both his own and yours. The martial arts community whispered that Chen didn't fight for honor, glory, or even money anymore. He fought because violence was the only language he truly understood, and killing was the only conversation that interested him. The challenge that sealed Bruce's fate. Bruce had returned to Hong Kong in 1964 after his time in America, and the young man I had trained was gone. In his place stood someone transformed, evolved, dangerous in ways I had never anticipated. His philosophy was changing rapidly. He was breaking away from traditional Wing Chun, creating his own path, developing what would eventually become Jeet Kune Do. This evolution angered many in the traditional martial arts community. They saw Bruce as a traitor, a rebel who disrespected the ancient ways that had sustained Chinese fighting arts for centuries. Behind closed doors, the older masters spoke of him with contempt and growing concern. But Chen Wei Long saw Bruce as something else entirely, a threat that needed to be eliminated. The challenge arrived on October 10th, exactly 1 week before the fight. A letter was delivered to Bruce's apartment in Kowloon Tong by a young boy who disappeared into the crowded streets before anyone could question him. I was there when Bruce opened the envelope, and I felt the temperature in the room drop as he read. The message was written in traditional Chinese characters, each stroke perfect and deliberate. Bruce Lee, you dishonor the masters. You disrespect tradition. You poison the young with your arrogance and Western corruption. On October 17th at midnight, come to Warehouse 7 in the Kowloon Bay Industrial District. Come alone. Bring witnesses. If you wish, they will carry news of your defeat back to your disciples. If you do not come, everyone will know you are a coward. If you do come, I will show you why tradition endures, because it kills those who challenge it. Chen Wei Long. Bruce read the letter 3 times, his face showing no emotion. But I knew him well enough to see the subtle tension in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. He looked up at me and said quietly, "Sifu, this is not a challenge. This is an execution invitation. Then do not go," I told him immediately. Chen Wei Long is not seeking honor or testing skill. He is seeking blood. There is no shame in refusing a death match with a professional killer. Bruce was silent for a long moment, staring at the letter. Then he said something that still echoes in my mind 50 years later. "Sifu, I have spent my entire life preparing for moments I hoped would never come. If I run from this, everything I teach becomes a lie. I am not going there to die. I'm going there to prove that fear is just another opponent, and like all opponents it can be defeated." The impossible decision, I tried to dissuade him for 3 days. So did his wife, Linda. So did his closest friends. We begged him to consider what he was risking, not just his life, but his future, his family, everything he was building. But Bruce had made his decision with the cold logic that would later characterize his approach to martial arts. Chen Wei Long was more than just another fighter seeking to test himself against Bruce's growing reputation. Chen represented something deeper, the violent resistance of traditional martial arts to evolution and change. "If I don't face him," Bruce explained to us, "he'll just keep coming." Men like Chen don't accept refusal. They see it as proof that they were right all along. This ends now, one way or another. The only concession Bruce made was this: he would allow 8 witnesses to attend. 4 would be chosen by Chen, 4 by Bruce. I would be one of Bruce's witnesses despite my age and my terror at what we might see. The others Bruce chose were James Lee, his close friend and training partner from America, Taki Kimura, one of his first students in Seattle who had flown to Hong Kong specifically for this, and Wang Kai Ming, a young journalist who had been documenting Bruce's evolution from traditional Wing Chun toward his new philosophy. Chen's 4 witnesses were unknown to us, silent, stone-faced men who arrived at the warehouse before we did and positioned themselves in the shadows like statues guarding a tomb. The Warehouse of Death, Warehouse 7, stood in an industrial district that had been largely abandoned after a fire the previous year. The building had once stored shipping equipment for the massive container vessels that fed Hong Kong's booming economy. Now it was a hollow shell, 40 feet high and nearly empty except for a few rusted metal beams and the lingering smell of machine oil and decay. We arrived at 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the appointed time. The night was unseasonably cold for October, with a thin fog rolling in from Victoria Harbor that made the streetlights look like dim ghosts floating in the darkness. Bruce wore simple black clothing, loose cotton pants, and a sleeveless shirt that would allow for complete freedom of movement. No shoes. He wanted to feel the concrete beneath his feet, to use every advantage the environment might provide. His hands were wrapped lightly in cloth, but not heavily taped. He wanted to feel everything. Chen Wei Long was already there. The first thing you noticed about Chen wasn't his size, though he was massive, perhaps 6 feet tall, and close to 220 pounds of solid muscle, earned through decades of brutal training. It wasn't the scars that covered his arms and torso like a map of violence survived. It was his stillness. Chen stood in the center of that concrete space like a statue carved from granite. He did not shift his weight. He did not stretch or warm up. He did not pace or shadowbox or show any of the nervous energy that most fighters display before combat. He simply existed, breathing so slowly and quietly that from a distance, you might think he wasn't breathing at all. His eyes, dark, motionless, empty of everything human, were fixed on the entrance, waiting for Bruce with the patience of a predator that knows its prey has no escape. When Bruce stepped into the harsh light of the single overhead bulb, Chen's expression did not change. Not a flicker of recognition, not a hint of respect or contempt. Nothing. It was as if Bruce was already dead in his mind, and what stood before him was merely a formality to be processed. "You came," Chen said, his voice deep and gravelly, like stones grinding together in a mill. "I did not think you would. Most men value their lives more than their pride." Bruce walked slowly toward the center of the cleared space, his movement fluid and relaxed despite the tension I could see coiled beneath the surface. Not fear. I had seen Bruce afraid before, and this wasn't it. This was readiness, the mental preparation of a warrior who understands he may not survive the next hour. "I came because you called me a coward," Bruce said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the cavernous space. "I came because you think tradition gives you the right to judge others. And I came because someone needs to show you that the old ways are not the only ways." Chen's lips curled into something that might have been a smile, though it held no warmth, no humor, nothing recognizably human. "The old ways have survived for centuries," he said, beginning to circle slowly, his footsteps silent on the concrete. "You are 23 years old. You are a child playing with fire. Tonight, you will learn why tradition endures, because it kills those who challenge it." The rules of death. One of Chen's witnesses stepped forward, an elderly man with a long white beard, wearing traditional robes that marked him as a senior master from one of Hong Kong's oldest martial arts schools. He spoke in a formal, ceremonial tone that echoed off the warehouse walls. "This match will continue until one fighter surrenders, is rendered unconscious, or dies. There will be no rules beyond these. No referee, no time limits, no mercy. Both fighters have agreed to these terms. Witnesses will not interfere under any circumstances, regardless of what they see." "Do both fighters accept these conditions?" "I accept," Chen said immediately, his voice flat and mechanical. Bruce paused for just a moment, and I saw him glance toward me. In that brief look, I saw something I had never seen in his eyes before, not fear of dying, but sorrow at what his death would do to those who loved him. Then his expression hardened, and he turned back to Chen. "I accept." The old man stepped back into the shadows, and the warehouse fell into absolute silence. Even the distant sounds of Hong Kong at night, the cars, the boats in the harbor, the voices of late night vendors seemed to fade away, as if the city itself was holding its breath. The dance of death begins. I have witnessed hundreds of fights in my lifetime, spanning 7 decades in the martial arts. I've seen masters demonstrate techniques that seem to defy physics. I've seen speed, power, and precision that left audiences speechless. I've watched Bruce himself perform feats that I would have called impossible before I saw them with my own eyes. But I had never seen two fighters face each other with such complete, terrifying focus as I witnessed that night. This wasn't sport, wasn't competition, wasn't even traditional challenge fighting. This was war distilled to its purest form, two men alone, with the understanding that only one would walk away. Chen moved first. There was no warning, no shift in his stance, no telegraphing of intention. One moment he was perfectly still, the next moment he was in motion. The speed was shocking for a man of his size and build, not the explosive burst of a sprinter, but the fluid, deadly grace of an apex predator. His lead hand shot forward in a straight punch aimed directly at Bruce's throat, not the jaw or the temple, but the soft tissue that would crush his windpipe and end the fight instantly. Following immediately behind came a devastating low kick toward Bruce's knee, designed to shatter the joint and drop him to the concrete, where Chen could finish him. Bruce moved forward into the attack. This was the first moment when I understood that everything I thought I knew about my student had been incomplete. Most fighters, faced with such an aggressive opening, would retreat, would try to create distance, would defend and look for a counter opportunity. Bruce did none of these things. He slipped Chen's throat punch by millimeters, so close that I saw Chen's knuckles brush past Bruce's ear. Simultaneously, he jammed Chen's kick with his own shin, neutralizing the power behind it, and fired a lightning, fast finger strike toward Chen's eyes. Chen pulled his head back just in time, Bruce's fingers passing within an inch of his face. But Bruce didn't stop there. He flowed immediately into a low sweep, trying to take Chen's legs out from under him while the bigger man was still off balance from avoiding the eye strike. Chen jumped over the sweep with surprising agility and came down with his heel aimed directly at Bruce's head, a killing blow that would have crushed his skull against the concrete if it had connected. Bruce rolled sideways, came up smoothly on his feet, and the two fighters separated, circling each other in the harsh light. The entire exchange had lasted less than 3 seconds. Wang Kai-ming, the young journalist, was trembling beside me. "Sifu," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "I have never seen anything like this. They are trying to kill each other." "Yes," I said quietly, my own heart pounding, "and only one of them will succeed." The professional at work, the circling continued for perhaps 20 seconds, an eternity in a fight of this intensity. Both men were reading each other, calculating distances, timing, vulnerabilities. Chen's face remained expressionless, but I could see a subtle shift in his posture. He had expected Bruce to retreat, to fight defensively, to try to survive rather than win. Instead, Bruce had moved into the attack, had nearly struck his eyes, had forced Chen to evade. This was not what Chen had expected from a disrespectful child. Bruce, for his part, showed the faintest trace of what might have been satisfaction. Not arrogance, not overconfidence, but the look of a scientist who had just confirmed a hypothesis. He had tested Chen's speed, his reflexes, his power, and now he knew exactly what he was facing. When Chen attacked again, it was with the calculated brutality of a professional killer. He came forward with a combination that would have destroyed most fighters. A faint high to draw Bruce's guard up, followed by a thunderous body punch aimed at the solar plexus, then a spinning back fist that generated enormous torque and power. Bruce blocked the body punch, and I saw him grimace as the impact traveled up his arms. Chen's fists were like iron hammers wrapped in flesh. The spinning back fist whistled through the air where Bruce's head had been a split second before, but Bruce's counter was already in motion. As Chen completed his spin, Bruce stepped inside his guard and unleashed what we call in Wing Chun the chain punch. A rapid series of straight strikes, 5 in less than a second, all aimed at Chen's center line. 3 connected solidly, 1 to the solar plexus that doubled Chen over slightly, 1 to the sternum that made him grunt, and 1 to the throat that sent him staggering backward, coughing. Any normal fighter would have gone down. Chen Wei Long stumbled backward 3 steps, his hand going to his throat, but he remained upright. When he looked at Bruce again, his face showed emotion for the first time, not pain, not surprise, but something that might have been professional interest. "You hit hard for a small man," Chen said, his voice slightly hoarse from the throat strike. "But hardness alone does not win fights. Let me show you what real power feels like." The killing intent, what happened next, changed the entire atmosphere of that warehouse. Chen Wei Long planted his feet and released a sound from deep within his chest. Not a shout, not a scream, but something primal and terrifying, a guttural roar that seemed to vibrate through the concrete floor itself. In traditional Chinese martial arts, we call this the Kai, the spirit shout that focuses all of one's internal energy into a single moment of expression. But Chen's was different. It was darker, colder, like the growl of something that had never been entirely human. Then he moved with a speed and ferocity that defied everything I thought I knew about human capability. Chen launched himself at Bruce with an assault that belonged in nightmares rather than reality. His attacks came in waves, devastating palm strikes that could stop a heart, crushing elbow blows that could shatter ribs, knee strikes that could rupture internal organs. Each technique carried the full weight of his body, the full force of his decades of training in the most brutal aspects of traditional martial arts. The sound of his strikes cutting through the air was like thunder rolling through the warehouse. Bruce defended desperately. He blocked what he could, evaded what he couldn't block, deflected strikes that would have been fatal if they'd landed clean. But Chen's assault was relentless, methodical, the work of a professional who had killed before and felt no hesitation about killing again. I saw Bruce take a glancing blow to the ribs that made him gasp and stumble. Another strike grazed his temple, and for a split second, I saw his legs wobble. Chen was doing what he did best, overwhelming his opponent with pure, sustained violence that had no mercy, no limits, no consideration for anything beyond total destruction. Taki Kimura grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. "Sifu, we have to stop this. Bruce is going to die." "No," I said, though my own heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "If we interfere, Chen's witnesses will claim Bruce surrendered. This must continue." But inside I was terrified. I had trained Bruce since he was a boy. I knew his capabilities, his limits, his incredible speed and timing. And I could see that Chen Wei Long was pushing him to the very edge of those limits, and perhaps beyond. Against the wall, Bruce retreated steadily across the concrete floor, his breathing becoming labored, sweat streaming down his face despite the cool night air. Chen pursued him like an inexorable force of nature, methodical, unstoppable, showing no signs of fatigue despite the incredible pace of his assault. The other witnesses stood frozen, their faces pale in the dim light. Even Chen's own witnesses seemed disturbed by the level of violence they were witnessing. This wasn't martial arts as most people understood it. This was systematic, professional brutality designed to end a human life. Then Bruce's back hit the wall. He had nowhere left to go. 40 feet of warehouse space, and Chen had herded him into the corner like a wolf driving prey off a cliff. Chen smiled, the first genuine expression I had seen on his face all night. It was not a pleasant sight. "It ends now," he said, drawing back his right hand for what was clearly meant to be a finishing blow. A palm strike aimed directly at Bruce's chest, at his heart, with enough focused power to stop it permanently. But in that fraction of a second, something changed in Bruce's eyes. I had seen this look only once before, years earlier during a training session, when Bruce had pushed himself to the point of complete physical exhaustion, and then suddenly found a reserve of energy that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the physical body. His first teacher, Yip Man My Own Sifu, had called it Wu Wei, the moment when conscious thought disappears and pure instinct takes control. The dragon awakens. Bruce didn't try to block Chen's finishing strike. He didn't attempt to evade it. He absorbed it. His hand moved with impossible speed and caught Chen's wrist just as the palm was about to make contact with his chest. The sound of their collision echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot, flesh meeting flesh, force meeting force, the irresistible meeting the immovable. For a frozen moment, the two men stood locked together, Chen's full power pressing forward, Bruce's entire body resisting, channeling, redirecting that massive force. And then Bruce moved. What happened next, I can only describe as an explosion of technique that seemed to come from somewhere beyond normal human capability. Bruce twisted Chen's captured wrist using a Wing Chun, Lop Sao, pulling the much larger man off balance. Simultaneously, he drove his knee into Chen's thigh, not the groin, but the precise point where the femoral nerve runs close to the surface. Chen's leg buckled slightly, just for an instant. But that instant was all Bruce needed. He released Chen's wrist and struck with surgical precision, a finger jab to the floating ribs that disrupted Chen's breathing. A palm strike to the collarbone that I heard crack even from where I stood 20 feet away, an elbow to the jaw that snapped Chen's head sideways, and finally, a side kick to Chen's knee that didn't break the joint but hyperextended it just enough to destroy his base. Chen Wei Long, the Iron Shadow, the professional killer who had never lost a fight, who had killed 3 men and crippled 7 others, crashed to the concrete floor with a sound like a building collapsing. The moment of truth, the warehouse fell into absolute silence. The overhead light continued to swing slightly, casting moving shadows across the scene. Bruce stood over Chen, his chest heaving with exhaustion. Blood trickling from a cut above his eye where one of Chen's strikes had grazed him. His entire body was trembling, not with fear, but with the massive adrenaline dump that follows a life or death encounter. Chen tried to rise. His powerful arms shook with the effort as he pushed himself up from the concrete. His face, for the first time in the entire encounter, showed something unmistakably human: pain, confusion, and the shock of absolute defeat. He made it to one knee, then attempted to stand. His injured leg gave out, and he fell back to the concrete, breathing heavily, staring up at Bruce with an expression I had never seen on any fighter's face before. "Stay down," Bruce said quietly, his voice hoarse and strained. "This is over." Chen looked up at him, and in that moment, I witnessed something extraordinary. The emptiness in Chen's eyes, that terrifying void that had marked him as something beyond normal human emotion, was gone. In its place was something almost like recognition, perhaps even understanding. "Why?" Chen asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't you finish me? You had the chance. You could have struck my throat, my temple. You could have killed me." Bruce extended his hand toward the fallen fighter. Chen stared at it for a long moment, as if he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. Then, slowly, he reached up and took it. Bruce pulled him to his feet, or rather to one foot, as Chen had to keep weight off his injured knee. "Because," Bruce said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent warehouse, "I didn't come here to kill you. I came here to prove a point. The old ways and the new ways, they don't have to be enemies. Tradition has value, but so does evolution. You are a master, Chen Wei Long, a true martial artist. But you've spent so long defending the past that you've forgotten the past was once the future. Someone somewhere created those ancient techniques you protect. They innovated, they evolved. I'm doing the same thing." The transformation. Chen was silent for a long moment, leaning heavily on Bruce for support. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of emotion I would never have believed possible from the man who had entered that warehouse. "I have fought for 23 years," Chen said slowly, each word carefully chosen. "I have broken men. I have killed men. I have built my reputation on fear and dominance. Tonight, you defeated me not just with your techniques, but with something I had forgotten existed: mercy." He paused, struggling with feelings that perhaps he hadn't experienced in decades. "I came here to destroy you, because I feared what you represented: change, evolution, the end of everything I had built my identity upon. But now I see that I was not protecting tradition. I was hiding behind it, using it as an excuse to remain stagnant, to avoid growth." One of Chen's witnesses, the elderly man who had announced the rules, stepped forward from the shadows. His face showed something I hadn't expected: tears. "In 40 years of witnessing matches," he said, his voice trembling, "I have never seen this. Mercy at the moment of victory. Honor when death was available. Bruce Lee, you have shown us something more valuable than fighting skill. You have shown us wisdom." The oath of silence, the atmosphere in that warehouse had shifted in a way I cannot fully describe. The violence, the anticipation of death, the primal fear, all of it dissolved, replaced by something almost sacred. James Lee stepped forward and handed Bruce a towel. Bruce wiped the blood from his face, wincing as he touched the cut above his eye. His hands were still shaking from the massive physiological stress he had endured. Chen Wei Long, still supported by his witnesses, looked around at all of us, the 8 people who had witnessed something that transcended sport, transcended even traditional martial arts challenge fighting. "I have one request," Chen said, his voice stronger now. "Bruce Lee, if you are willing, I would like to train with you. Not as student to teacher, not as teacher to student, but as equals exploring the martial path together. I have much to learn about evolution. Perhaps I have something to teach about the foundations that evolution must build upon." Bruce's face showed genuine surprise, then something that might have been joy. "Master Chen, nothing would honor me more. But first, we need to get you to a doctor. That knee needs proper treatment." "It will heal," Chen said dismissively. "Knees always do. But opportunities like this to train with someone who defeated you and then showed you mercy, those don't come twice in a lifetime." It was James Lee who suggested the oath. "We should swear to keep this secret," he said. "All 8 of us. What happened here tonight, the world isn't ready for this story. They would sensationalize it, commercialize it, turn it into entertainment. They would miss the profound truth of what occurred here." One by one, each witness agreed. We formed a circle in that dim warehouse, 4 men who had come with Bruce, 4 who had come with Chen, and spoke an oath that we would guard this secret until death, or until circumstances demanded that the truth be revealed. Wang Kai, Ming reluctantly closed his notebook. "This would have been the greatest story of my career," he said with a rueful smile. "But I understand. Some truths are too important to be reduced to newspaper headlines." The hidden partnership, true to his word. Chen Wei Long appeared at Bruce's school exactly 3 weeks later, walking with a slight limp that would remain with him for the rest of his life, a permanent reminder of that night in the warehouse. What followed was one of the most productive partnerships in martial arts history, though almost no one knew about it. They trained together in private, sharing techniques, philosophies, and insights that would influence both their approaches to combat and life. Chen taught Bruce about the deeper internal aspects of traditional Chinese martial arts, the breathing methods, the energy cultivation techniques, the mental discipline that had sustained warriors for centuries. Bruce taught Chen about biomechanics, efficiency of movement, cross-training concepts, and the willingness to discard what doesn't work regardless of how traditional it might be. Their training sessions became the stuff of legend among the few who were privileged to witness them. The contrast was fascinating. Chen, the traditional master, learning to question and experiment; Bruce, the innovator, learning to appreciate and integrate ancient wisdom. Years later, when Bruce moved to America and began developing Jeet Kune Do, his personal expression of martial arts, the influence of those sessions with Chen was evident throughout. Bruce's famous philosophy, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is specifically your own, was born from those conversations with the man who had once tried to kill him. The secret keeper's burden. Chen Wei Long never spoke publicly about the fight. He never sought credit for his influence on Bruce's development. He simply continued teaching, but with a different approach, more open, more curious, more willing to see value in new ideas. His students noticed the change, though they never understood its source. When Bruce Lee died tragically young in 1973, Chen Wei Long was one of only 8 people invited to a private ceremony before the public funeral. He stood silently, tears streaming down his weathered face, remembering the night a young warrior had defeated him and then given him back his soul. The 8 witnesses kept their oath faithfully. We never spoke of that night to outsiders. We never wrote about it for publication. We never sought recognition or credit. But we remembered. And now, through these journal pages discovered by Bruce's children, the story can finally be told not as a tale of violence, but as a story of transformation. Not as a record of one man's victory over another, but as a testament to the highest ideals of martial arts: respect, growth, mercy, and the endless pursuit of truth. The legacy revealed. What made this fight different from every other combat Bruce Lee ever engaged in was not the skill level of his opponent, though Chen Wei Long was certainly the most dangerous fighter Bruce ever faced. It was not the stakes, though they were literally life and death. It was not even the techniques displayed, though they represented the highest levels of traditional and evolving martial arts. What made this fight unique was the transformation it created in both participants. Bruce entered that warehouse as a young man challenging tradition. He left as someone who understood that true innovation must be built on a foundation of respect for what came before. The mercy he showed Chen, the hand he extended to help his fallen opponent rise, these actions defined Bruce's character more than any movie role or philosophical statement ever could. Chen Wei Long entered that warehouse as a professional killer, a man who had lost touch with the deeper meaning of martial arts. He left as someone reborn, someone who remembered that the ultimate goal of fighting is not to destroy your enemy, but to transcend the need for enemies altogether. Their partnership, hidden from the world for 50 years, influenced the development of modern martial arts in ways that historians are only beginning to understand. Every time someone speaks of martial arts as a path to self-improvement rather than just a means of violence, they are echoing the lesson learned in that Hong Kong warehouse on October 17, 1964. The truth finally told on that night in 1964, in a forgotten warehouse in Kowloon, 8 people witnessed Bruce Lee's deadliest fight. But what they truly witnessed was something far more rare and precious. The moment when combat transcends violence and becomes art, when defeating an enemy creates a friend, when the warrior's path leads not to destruction, but to enlightenment. Chen Wei Long was a professional killer who had never known defeat. Bruce Lee was a young revolutionary challenging centuries of tradition. Their collision should have ended in death. Instead, it ended in wisdom. That is the story we have kept secret for 50 years. That is the truth we now entrust to you. May it inspire you as it has inspired us, not to fight, but to understand, not to defeat, but to transform, not to destroy, but to create. This is the legacy of Bruce Lee. This is the lesson learned in darkness and sealed in silence. This is the fight that only 8 people witnessed, and that the world finally needed to hear. The dragon faced the deadliest opponent of his life and emerged not as a killer, but as something far more dangerous. A teacher who understood that the greatest victory is the one that transforms your enemy into your ally. After 50 years of silence, the truth is finally free.